Poor Waitress paid for a young man. The next day, 300 soldiers lined up for her. Rain tapped steadily against the diner's windows, thin streams running down the glass like tears. Inside, the warmth from the coffee machines did little to ease the fatigue pooling in Eliza's shoulders. The late shift always left her drained, but she wore her exhaustion behind a smile, pouring refills and wiping counters with quiet grace. It was near midnight when the door creaked open. A gust of cold air swept through, turning a few heads. A young man stepped inside, soaked to the bone, his coat torn at the sleeve and boots caked with dried mud. He moved slowly, not out of age, but caution, as if unsure whether he was welcome. Eliza looked up from the register, meeting his eyes. They were clear, startlingly so, beneath the tangled hair and wet lashes. He walked to the counter, his hand slightly trembling. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said, voice soft, barely louder than the rain. "I just need a meal. I have no money, but if you could spare a sandwich, anything warm, I'll do dishes, clean floors, whatever you need." Eliza hesitated. He was young, maybe her age, maybe younger, but the lines in his face told a story far older. There was no begging in his tone, no pity sought, only quiet dignity wrapped in desperation. She looked toward the kitchen, then at the tray holding a full plate of meatloaf and mashed potatoes, a canceled order, still hot. Without another word, she slid the tray off the warmer, added a cup of black coffee, and placed it gently in front of him. "Someone canceled their order," she said. "Seems a waste to throw it out." The man blinked. "I thank you. I mean it," she smiled, already turning back to grab extra napkins. "You don't have to mean it. Just eat." But the moment shattered as a sharp voice cut through the quiet. "Eliza," her manager Greg stepped out from the back, his expression thunderous. "What is this?" "It was a returned meal," she said calmly. "He's hungry." "I do not care if the Pope is hungry. We don't give away food." Eliza stood her ground. "It would have gone to waste." "Not your call," Greg snapped. "You're not running a charity. You want to feed the whole damn street? Do it on your own dime." Eliza looked at the young man who had set his fork down, already halfway to standing. "I'll leave," he murmured. "No," she said quickly, then turning to Greg, "take it out of my tips." Greg's lip curled. "You're fired." Silence fell like a dropped glass. The diner froze. Eliza untied her apron slowly, placed it on the counter, and nodded once. No anger, no tears, just tired acceptance. She stepped into the rain, the door slamming shut behind her. The cold hit her like a slap, but she didn't flinch. She walked down the street, her coat thin against the wind, the weight of her decision heavier than her soaked shoes. Behind her, footsteps splashed through puddles. She turned. The young man had followed her, jacket pulled tight, his eyes searching hers. "I'll never forget what you did in there," he said, voice rough with cold and something else. "You didn't treat me like trash. You saw me." Eliza looked at him, truly looked. The storm had etched shadows under his eyes, but something in him was unbroken. She offered a small smile, one hand pressed to her chest to keep in the warmth of that moment. "Everyone deserves to be seen," she whispered. Then, without another word, she turned and walked into the night, unaware that this moment, this choice, would echo far beyond what she could ever imagine. The room above the laundromat smelled faintly of detergent and mildew. Eliza closed the door behind her with a tired sigh, letting her damp jacket fall from her shoulders onto the lone chair by the wall. The heater groaned when she twisted the knob, more noise than warmth. Smokey, her rescued orange tabby, meowed from his perch on the windowsill, stretching lazily before curling back into himself. She sat on the edge of her mattress, toes tingling with cold, fingers still clutching the last of her dignity. Fired, just like that, for feeding a stranger a meal someone else had already abandoned. Her tips for the week, what little she had, were already gone on cat food and a half bag of groceries. Rent was due in 4 days, and she was already late on the electric bill. She stared at the ceiling, blinking back tears that refused to fall. The next morning, a knock at the door startled her. Not a loud knock, just 2 soft taps. When she opened it, no one stood in the hallway. Just a plain, white envelope lying at her feet. Cautiously, she picked it up and stepped back inside. The flap wasn't sealed. Inside was cash, enough to cover next month's rent. She gasped softly, fingers trembling as she unfolded the note tucked inside. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. People like you deserve more than survival. There was no name, no signature, just those words and the quiet weight of them. Eliza clutched the paper to her chest, her mind racing. Who? Why? She thought back to the man from the diner, his clear eyes, the way he'd looked at her like she was the first person to truly see him in a long time. Later that week, while walking home from a nearby food pantry, Eliza paused at the corner of the church. A small crowd had gathered in the alley beside it, volunteers setting up folding tables with warm food, clean socks, and first aid kits. She stepped closer, drawn by the scent of baked bread and the quiet laughter of people who hadn't had much to laugh about. And then she saw him. Same eyes, same build, but now clean-shaven, wearing a dark wool coat and gloves. He stood behind a table, handing out wrapped sandwiches and thermoses of coffee. His smile was quiet but real, the kind that came from someplace honest. She stood frozen for a moment before stepping forward. "Hey," she said, unsure if he'd remember. He looked up and smiled like he had been waiting for her. "Eliza." She blinked. "How did you—" "I asked around," he said simply, reaching beneath the table. He pulled out a wrapped sandwich and offered it to her. She hesitated. "It's turkey," he said, "with cranberry spread. I remembered you mentioned it was your favorite when you served me." She accepted it slowly, fingers brushing his. It was warm. "You didn't have to." He shook his head. "You gave me my first real meal in days. This is the first one I get to share." There was a quiet between them, not awkward, just gentle. "You look different," she said. He chuckled. "A shower and a shave will do that." She studied him. There was something steady in the way he stood, something that didn't quite fit the story of a man down on his luck. But before she could ask more, a woman behind him called his name. "Aiden." He turned, gave a small wave, then looked back at Eliza. "Come back tomorrow. I'd like to talk more." And with that, he turned back to his table, handing out cups of coffee to a pair of veterans who patted him on the back. Eliza walked home that night with the sandwich still warm in her hands and something even warmer curling in her chest. She didn't know who Aiden really was yet, but she knew, somehow, her story with him wasn't over. The winter deepened slowly in the small town of Millridge, casting frost over windows and weaving chill into the breath of morning. Yet, amidst the cold, Eliza found warmth, not in electricity or blankets, but in the quiet presence of a man who never quite left her thoughts. Aiden. He had become a constant in the backdrop of her struggling days. At the community soup kitchen, she would often find him already there before her, tying aprons behind his back, sleeves rolled up, greeting the elderly with a kind nod and children with warm jokes. At the charity clinic where Eliza had taken a part-time job helping schedule appointments, Aiden would swing by, dropping off supplies or walking patients across the slushy street without fanfare. "You volunteer everywhere," she teased once, handing him a box of donated scarves to distribute. "I like warm things," he replied with a shrug. People, soup, scarves, smiles. But whenever she asked about him, his job, where he lived, how he came to be in town, he'd dodge the question with a half smile and change the subject. "Some stories take time to tell," he once said, eyes flickering toward the snow-dusted rooftops. "And some are better heard when you're ready to listen." It should have bothered her, his mystery, but it didn't, not when his actions spoke louder than most confessions ever could. One morning, as Eliza stepped out of her apartment, she found a single daisy placed carefully on the doormat. Slightly crooked, bright against the gray cement, tied around its stem was a scrap of brown string and a note scribbled on the back of a bakery receipt. "Just because the world's been gray doesn't mean you have to be." It was the first time in weeks she genuinely laughed. Not a tired exhale, not a hollow smile. An honest laugh that bubbled up and startled even Smokey, who blinked at her from the windowsill. She tucked the daisy into a mason jar and placed it on her nightstand. It stayed there, still, long after its petals began to curl inward. Their rhythm became something sacred, a nod across the pantry, a cup of cocoa passed wordlessly at the bus stop, a shared silence on the church steps after closing time. But one Friday, the chill seeped in deeper than usual. Eliza woke with a sore throat and a fever that burned behind her eyes. She wrapped herself in layers and still felt like ice had taken root in her bones. Work called, asking her to rest and stay home. Her neighbor, an elderly woman named Marge, dropped off a bottle of ginger tea, but by nightfall Eliza couldn't keep anything down. She curled into herself beneath 3 blankets, Smokey pressed to her side, shivering despite the space heater humming at her feet. The world felt very far away, her breath short, her head pounding. A soft knock stirred her. Weakly she shuffled to the door. No one there. But on the ground a small thermos steamed gently inside a cloth-wrapped basket. Beside it, a folded piece of paper. With trembling fingers she opened the note. "I know this town gets cold, especially when your body's fighting to stay warm. Tonight let me return just a little of what you gave me. It's chicken soup, my mother's recipe. Eat slowly, feel loved." It was signed with just one letter, A. The soup was rich, golden, with carrots cut unevenly and noodles that clung to the spoon like they were afraid to be left behind. Each sip warmed more than her stomach. It warmed a place inside her chest that had been quiet for far too long. She didn't see Aiden that night, but she didn't need to. In the weeks that followed, they didn't talk about feelings or plans, but something was building, delicate, intentional, a trust not declared, but built from shared kindness and unspoken glances. And though she still didn't know who he truly was, Eliza no longer feared the mystery, because whatever his story, it had led him to her doorstep, and somehow that made all the difference. The knock came like thunder. Eliza opened the door with a hesitant hand, still in her faded diner uniform from the night before. She had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted and heartsick from too many shifts and too little rest. But what she saw on the other side of the door jolted her fully awake. 2 soldiers stood tall in full dress uniform, caps under one arm, stoic and silent. Behind them stretched a line of black military vehicles, engines humming, forming an arc around her narrow street. "Eliza Hart?" the taller one asked. She nodded slowly, her breath caught in her throat. "You're requested for immediate transport to Fort Alder." I think you have the wrong person," she stammered. "We do not." The soldier's voice was firm but respectful. "There is a ceremony. You are the guest of honor." Neighbors were peeking out through blinds, stepping onto porches, whispering. A child dropped his bicycle. A woman clutched her chest. No one understood what was happening, least of all Eliza. The soldiers opened the rear door of the lead vehicle. "We've been instructed to escort you with full honors." Eliza didn't know what to say. Her body moved before her brain caught up. She climbed in. As the convoy pulled out of the neighborhood, sirens were not blaring, but the tension in the air was deafening. A caravan of black SUVs and military trucks rolled through town like a silent parade, traffic parting to let them pass. Police had blocked off intersections. People stood on sidewalks, pointing, filming, speculating. Inside the vehicle, Eliza sat frozen. Her palms were damp, her heart thundered. This had to be a mistake. Fort Alder came into view after nearly an hour. High fences, guarded towers, the massive flag snapping against a pale morning sky. The gates opened for them, and there, just past the checkpoint, was a sight that stole Eliza's breath. 300 soldiers stood in perfect formation, shoulder to shoulder, stretching across the field in rows. The entire front plaza of the base had been cleared for this moment. The soldiers' uniforms were pristine, boots shined, medals glinted in the sun, and not a single one moved or spoke. As Eliza stepped out of the vehicle, the silence was deafening. Even the wind seemed to still. Her shoes crunched on the gravel. She was led, trembling, down a path lined with honor guards. Their salutes were raised in unison, sharp, reverent, precise. At the far end of the path, on a small platform flanked by flags, stood a man she barely recognized. But her heart did. It was Aiden. Dressed in his formal military uniform, chest adorned with honors, cap under his arm. his posture proud, his face no longer shadowed by hunger or fatigue, but lit with clarity and quiet strength. She stopped halfway. "Aiden?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "What is this?" He stepped forward, his tone calm but powerful. "My name is Major Aiden Black. I serve in a Special Operations Division